Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco's in. He's got observations on what he saw at the joint practices and then what he's watching tonight. He was in attendance at the NovaCare Complex for the Eagles and the Browns. They'll be there tonight. By the way, if you're just tuning in, Hassan Reddick to undergo thumb surgery, and he will be out for the rest of training camp preseason. They do anticipate that he will be ready to play for the opener against the New England Patriots. Let's bring Andrew DiCecco into the mix right now, get some observations from the last two practices, the joint practices with the Browns, and then what he's looking forward to seeing tonight as he joins us now for Football at 4 on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. AD DiCecco, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Mike, I'm doing well, man. Excited to see some preseason football. I'm not like most people. I actually do enjoy the preseason because I like seeing these young guys play. But how are you, man?
I was going to say, I'm doing good, man. And I'm happy, too, because no Phils tonight, so I can zone in on the Eagles, and I don't have to flip back and forth. I have some guys I want to see. I want to see if they match up with some of your guys. I was actually thinking about that. Like, you're one of those guys who probably really likes these preseason games because I know you like to dig a little deeper on these rosters. So let's get some of the observations that you got from the 2 days of joint practices between the Eagles and the Browns. Let's start there. Some of the things that kind of stood out to you when these two teams played. The first and second team guys, from my understanding, none of the third team guys got a lot of reps in these two practices.
Right, so I was there on Tuesday, which ultimately was the better practice to attend, as it turns out, Mike. But, I mean, the intensity from the get-go was ratcheted up. That was certainly palpable. You got the sense that the Eagles had a sort of a wake-up call after the first practice and knowing that they're a really talented team, but you can't roll out of bed and expect to beat anyone. You can get beat at any given week. And I think that they showed up looking to prove a point, and they completely demolished the Browns. It wasn't even close on Tuesday. They outclassed them in every way possible. And what really stood out to me, I mean, there's a number of things. I thought Jalen Hurts in the beginning of practice, particularly throwing in 7-on-7 drills, was a little bit off the mark. I can recall a couple different pass plays in particular. One was an overshot he overshot Devontae Smith in the corner of the end zone when he was open. But, I mean, he really picked it up later in practice. I was standing right there when at one point in 11-on-11 drills, he was scrambling and that he points in AJ's direction, almost to say, go to the corner. AJ gets a step on Martin Emerson, the Browns corner, reels in a nice touchdown catch, and the symbiotic relationship between those two is really something to behold. I thought that Jalen Carter looked really good from what I saw. You saw Sidney. I saw a lot of good things. I saw Sua Opeta was the left guard in place of Landon Dickerson. Josh Sills certainly worked in. Nicholas Morrow was the first-team linebacker opposite Nakobe Dean. I saw a lot of Kenny Gainwell. Kenny Gainwell saw got the first rep of the 11-on-11s. But I also saw a lot of DeAndre Swift, and I thought he caught the ball exceptionally well, and I think he's going to add a really interesting wrinkle to the Eagles' offense and really make it really hard to defend.
Yeah, I want to get some more on the running back stuff as you just kind of threw Gainwell out there. Everybody seemingly is now putting him at the top of the depth chart. You got Swift. If you look at the Eagles' depth chart over at PhiladelphiaEagles.com, they've got all five guys listed as the starter. But you were there. You saw it. How do you kind of handicap the running back race and then kind of include what you're looking for tonight in that?
Well, that's a great question, Mike, and I think that's the great mystery of the preseason. We're not really going to glean much, but based on what I've seen in practice and what I can sort of ascertain based on just the usage in general, I would think that Kenny Gainwell is going to be your primary running back, working in tandem in the early down situations with Rashad Penny. And then I think your third down running back / pass-catching running back is going to be DeAndre Swift. Now, I don't know how Boston Scott or, say, a Trey Sermon's going to figure into the equation, but that's sort of how I see it right now. And I think that would be the best-case scenario because you really would get to preserve someone like a DeAndre Swift, and he looks lethal with the ball in his hands, really good route runner. In the open field, he's going to be super explosive, and you really want to preserve that throughout the season. But that's the way I sort of see it right now. But tonight, I really don't know what you're really going to be able to tell. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of Boston Scott, a lot of Trey Sermon, some Kennedy Brooks, I imagine, as well. I don't think you're going to be able to tell much about it. They're running behind reserve lines. There's not going to be it's going to be tough sledding in there for any of those guys to really make an impact.
Talking to Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. He'll be there tonight. A couple things that stood out this week, and then we'll kind of morph it into tonight. That's the running back room there. Third wide receiver, we all kind of look like Quez Watkins is kind of pulling away from Zacchaeus over there. But what about the rest of that running back wide receiver room, Any standouts in your mind that will be interesting for the viewers and listeners to kind of keep an eye on tonight?
Yeah, Tyreek Cleveland. I've mentioned him on your show a couple months ago as somebody that I saw as a dark horse to keep an eye on in training camp. I've written about him on InsideTheBirds.com, and a lot of people forget, but he was signed to the Eagles practice squad late in the season last year, and he has that a full off season working with Aaron Moorhead, receivers coach Aaron Moorhead, and just being familiarized with Jalen Hurts and what they're looking to do and getting on the same page. And I think that you really saw, and I really saw in training camp, Joseph Ngata got a lot of praise because he has the size. He's freshly out of college. He's from Clemson. He had an injury-riddled career, but he was highly touted, 5-star recruit. But to me, I always thought that Cleveland has 4.4 speed. He was a Senior Bowl invite. He overlapped with offensive coordinator Brian Johnson at Florida. And by the way, he's played 23 games in the NFL. And that you can really see that take shape on the practice field. He looks like he belongs. He looks like he's taking a lot of snaps, aggressive to the football, fast, just a confident player. And he's seen things that a lot of these other guys haven't. But he hasn't played a ton of snaps, but he was a special team standout for the Broncos, which also plays into his favor. And he also played some snaps on offense. And I think that he looks like he's most equipped if they need to keep a sixth receiver to step in and provide some snaps.
Yeah, Cleveland's a guy that a lot of people seem to be high on now, and how much room in that wide receiver room is there? We'll keep an eye on him, and obviously the offensive line. I think one of the things about the offensive line that we saw, Cam Jurgens, you've got Dickerson missed a couple snaps during the joint practices. Kelsey went out, so finding the depth on that offensive line, I think, will kind of be imperative tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question I've gotten a lot lately, Mike, because I see Sua Opeta, and he got the nod when Landon Dickerson was out the other day. And, Sua Opeta's been around for 5 years. But I would also tell you that the Eagles kept Josh Sills around on the roster all last season. He wasn't really a factor at all. They kept him all through his off-the-field matters. And then as soon as he was eligible to get back on the practice field, he was up in the second team and taking snaps pretty much instantaneously. I think the Eagles really like him. I think that he's younger than Sua. He's moldable. And I think he offers some intrigue there as far as a developmental guard prospect on the reserve. Obviously, Jack Driscoll's there as a guy that can really provide depth in a number of areas. Dennis Kelly really tailed off, and I'm not even quite sure that he's going to make the team based on what I've seen, but it's something to keep an eye on, tonight and the following week against the Colts to see if he's able to capitalize on his opportunities and seize a roster spot. But there's it's not quite what it's been in the past, Mike, but I do think that there are a couple of guys that they can really solidify it. Brett Toth was somebody that had opportunities to be a backup center in training camp. He couldn't get the snapping the ball. He couldn't get that part down, which is obviously pretty crucial. So he ended up moving down to third-team guard. I initially had him making the team as the final lineman, but now I'm not so sure if that's the case. It's going to be interesting. They could easily go with eight linemen and have a couple guys on the practice squad stashed away and do the roster tango that way as well.
Yeah, that would be something to keep an eye on, that offensive line tonight. Some of those placements up front. Tyler Steen's another guy I want to see more of. I thought he looked pretty impressive moving around on Saturday night. We'll see how he fares tonight. We also know that there's plenty of things that we can talk about on the defensive side of the ball, but one guy who flashed, and I want to get your thoughts on what you thought about him coming into the draft, and now Sidney Brown, what he might project as a rookie this year and where he kind of sits in your mind with a lot of veterans in that room.
Yeah, Sidney Brown, what an electric player, man. I had a late second-round pick on him. I thought the Eagles got good value where they did get him, but if there's one blemish to his game, it's that he plays the game at 100 miles an hour, which if he's able to capitalize, that's going to benefit the defense greatly because I think he's somebody that can wreak havoc on a regular basis. But those opportunities when he's a little bit over-aggressive, I think it's gonna tend to lean towards some over-pursuing and missed tackles and things like that. So it could be more of a feast or famine situation, but man, the other day he said, "I want to be feared." And he's always around the football. He's aggressive. He's going to be a fan favorite. And I think that right now he's processing things pretty quickly. I don't know that he's going to open the season as the starter because I think that that's a tall order for any rookie, especially coming into the NFL at the defensive back position. I think that the learning curve sometimes a little bit steeper there than maybe other positions, but I think that he's coming along pretty rapidly, and I think the Eagles are pleased with what they've seen. And he loved his tenacity and his aggressiveness. And, I mean, right away, you could tell on Tuesday, I said, I had a feeling that Sidney Brown was going to get into it with somebody or maybe even Kayvon Wallace. Sure enough, it was Sidney Brown. So, you love his mentality and his demeanor, and I think he's going to be a pretty prominent player on this Eagles defense for the foreseeable future.
They could use it because right now, Reed Blankenship, what was your impressions of Blankenship? He kind of leads that room, and right now it's almost like a fait accompli that he's the guy definitively in there, and I'm not questioning that. But what did you see from Blankenship out there on the practice field? I know he had a bunch of interceptions and stuff, but are you confident enough that Reed Blankenship can be the lead safety on a team?
Based on the knowledge that we have, yeah, definitely, man. And I've always said this, what lacks in pure athleticism and speed, he more than makes up for with football intellect and just his knowledge of the game and the way he sees things, his instincts. He's always in the right place. He's always around the football. He's playing with a lot of confidence, and you really started to see that. Picking off Deshaun Watson will certainly help that confidence. But I mean, you just get the sense that he's knowing that that they've tried different guys beside him. He's remained the constant with the first team. I thought that he really came on in his opportunities last year. He proved that he belonged, and he's just playing confident. He's physical. He's a tone setter, and I think that he provides stability on the back end. Now the question becomes, who's going to be his best partner? Who's best equipped to be his partner on the other side? If I had to guess, I would say Terrell on experience, but ultimately, I think it's just a matter of time before it becomes Sidney Brown.
Yeah, that will be something to keep an eye on. Blankenship Brown, can that be the pairing and be better than the Epps and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson pairing that you had last year? And then, of course, you got the linebacking pairing. And I don't know what we learned Saturday night, but you probably got a chance to see more on Tuesday from that linebacking group of vagabonds and outcasts, if you will. What did you learn about linebacker when you were there on Tuesday, and what do you want to see tonight?
Well, I thought it was interesting that Nicholas Mora opened with the first team as opposite Nakobe Dean, and knowing that he's had an inconsistent and up and down camp. I mean, you have to like his experience and his athleticism. And at one point, it really caught me off guard because I see this number 41 going wide of the formation, shadowing Nick Chubb. And then obviously the ball never went to Nick Chubb's in his direction. So that was a mismatch. But I think that he's an athletic player. You worry about his size paired next to Nakobe Dean. That kind of leaves him a little bit vulnerable against the run, I would think. But I think it's really going to come down to Christian Ellis or Zach Cunningham for who ultimately gets that second job as the starter there. I think Christian Ellis has had some brilliant moments this offseason. He's somebody that's really parlayed his landing camp success. He has some size to him, more size than any other linebacker the Eagles currently have, except for Zach Cunningham. And he runs well, and he's no TAs is one thing, but I thought that he's really parlayed that success, but he just hasn't done it a lot in the game situations, whereas Zach Cunningham has. He had a couple pass breakups in the offseason since he's been here in Philly. The most recent one was intercepted by Reed Blankenship, which led to that scuffle the other day when Sidney Brown, really laid in the ground running back Trick Felton. But I think Zach Cunningham, to me, would be the best partner right now opposite Nakobe Dean, sort of like a TJ Edwards-esque player.
That'll be something to keep an eye on tonight. And then, one of the guys, Moro and Jomo, is a name that just, I thought Saturday night, I thought he got great push, didn't get enough attention maybe because there were so many other things going on. I can't wait to watch him more tonight. And I just don't know, is there room on the roster for him?
Yeah, he's an interesting player, Mike, and there's so many things going on and so many different things I'm watching when I am watching the preseason. So watching it the first time, I was paying attention to guys like Mario Goodrich and the young defensive backs, Mekhi Garner. But then on second watch, I was really focusing on the trench play. And, man, Moro Ojomo really had a strong opening performance, strong usage, power. He's got long optional versatility potentially that they could certainly tap into. I think that he's someone every summer about a number of different, but I think in his case, him being so young, him having these tantalizing athletic traits and that superhuman strength, and the fact that he's just buried on the depth chart, I think that ultimately is why he's not going to see more snaps, whereas in other situations he probably would. I think the Eagles will be more inclined to spend their roster. I also think Marlon Tuipulotu probably would factor into the equation as well. I don't know that Contavious Street has much of a shot right now, but I think Ojomo would be one of my final players to make it just based on his upside. And he's, from what I've seen so far, you have to be impressed with what you see.
Yeah, I would imagine they don't want to put him on the practice squad, don't want to cut him, that he makes the 53 and maybe he's just inactive on games. And there's a lot of other guys in that room that I'm imagining they got to figure out, some roster gymnastics, how to try to figure out how to keep all that talent in that defensive tackle room. Finally, the last big battles, I guess, if you will, is at corner where it's a crowded room behind the starters. You got Maddox, you've got Slay, and you've got Bradbury. And then after that, you got who?
Well, right now, Josh Jobe is the top backup corner on the outside, that is. And you have Zach McPherson, who offers inside and outside versatility, and he's one of the better young gunners on special teams, which is a crucial role that doesn't necessarily get a lot of accolades during the regular season or anything like that. But I mean, it is very vital, and he serves that role for the team. And obviously, he's somebody that a lot of fans can't necessarily appreciate because he hasn't been on defense a lot. He hasn't flashed, but he's a valuable player. We even saw him return a couple of punts last week. I know everyone is really pushing for Eli Ricks to grab one of those final spots, but we have to see more. Getting an interception in 21 snaps and having a few pass breakups in the fourth quarter of a preseason game is one thing, but we know he has the pedigree. But I would like to see him get more snaps and have a larger sample size to go off of, because in order for him to get a roster spot, he's going to have to do more than that. And especially if you're talking about unseating a guy like a Zach McPherson, who provides a pretty big role for this Eagles team, and certainly Josh Jobe. I think Josh Jobe has his spot locked up. I mean, he's. When Bradbury was out earlier in the summer, he stepped in admirably as the backup corner on the outside. He's physical. He has long arms. You should have seen it when he had the interception the other day on a fade ball to Cedric Tillman off Josh Dobbs. The whole defense ran out on the field and swarmed them. Listening to Slay talk after practice, he said he was like a proud dad. He alluded to how proud he was for Josh Jobe just based on how hard he's worked. And he also playfully said that he probably has the worst hands of all the DBs on the team, but you get the sense that he's got his spot solidified there. So I think that when you're looking at it in those terms, it becomes, is it going to be Mekhi Garner? Is it going to be Eli Ricks? Maybe a Mario Goodrich? I think that, or even is there room for any of those guys? I think that's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on tonight.
Yeah, I think that corner battle should be fun tonight. We'll see. Now, here's you saw them in the joint practices where you got to see the starters. Cleveland had their starters out there, but tonight you're not going to see a lot from Cleveland either. So how much do the Eagles take from playing against Cleveland's second and third and fourth guys?
Well, I mean, it's all relative. I mean, but I think that the Eagles, they prioritize joint practices and getting that quality work in over preseason play. And I think that when you saw it was primarily the first and second teamers that got all the work, at least when I was there. And you didn't see any work at all from the third or fourth teamers, which tells you that they're going to see a lot of opportunity and a lot of snaps tonight. But I think the Eagles, they maximize the joint practices, and they get a lot of there's a lot of benefit in there for them. So I think if they were able to glean a lot from that, the high intensity and things like that, different situational football and things like that. Whereas in the preseason, I mean, you're always talking about a handful of snaps for the starters. There's the high potential for risk there. There's not a lot you can take away from that. But I think that, when you're evaluating the third or fourth teamers, I mean, all they can do is line up and play against whoever's in front of them. And they have to base it off of what they've seen over the past 2.5 weeks of training camp as well. And I think that all factors into the evaluation process.
Well, it should be interesting tonight. I know the back end of the roster still being put together. It's going to be, if I was to ask you, Andrew, do you have a surprise cut in your mind? Is there someone that you think will be cut that people will be surprised by?
I don't know if it would be a surprise, but you have to wonder where Britton Covey stands right now. I mean, he didn't necessarily have his spot locked up, and he missed the entire both joint practices with a hamstring issue. And I mean, he's their only punt returner right now, but Zach McPherson showed you that he can capably do that. Granted, it was only a couple of times. I wonder tonight if you're going to see Tyreek Cleveland perhaps have an opportunity to do that, because Covey really is a specialty player, and when you're not out there, I mean, when you're already on the fringes as it is, I don't know that you can etch anything in stone. So he might be a guy that I would consider a surprise cut, because he went into training camp pretty much with his roster spot stamped, knowing that he was the only punt returner.
Okay, which of the running backs, if someone gets cut, do you anticipate that being? Because they're not going to keep all five, right?
No, and I love this question. Right now, I think that I would probably say Trey Sermon. I think Trey Sermon, they're giving him every opportunity to do something. They tried him out at kick returner, looked very indecisive, didn't have a lot of burst or any sort of juice. We'll see if he gets more looks in that area tonight. That's something I'll be keeping an eye on. But and it's really tough to assess how good he is or how his vision is when the offensive line in front of him is not getting a whole lot of push, and he's not a back that has a ton of wiggle to begin with. But I think so. That's where I think that you have to base that. You also take into account what you've seen in practice. But I just don't know that he brings another element to the table that they don't already have, and I certainly don't think he's shown enough in his career, in his limited sample size, that you fear him getting claimed off waivers. I think that's something that you see I guess you would see the concern about all these different guys getting cut. You see a lot of people wondering whether or not they're going to get claimed. That rarely ever happens. And I think in Trey Sermon's case, I just don't see it.
All right, Andrew DiCecco is going to be there tonight. You can read all about it at InsideTheBirds.com. And, of course, Adam Kaplan will recap it tomorrow during football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Andrew, appreciate you, man, and enjoy the game tonight.
You bet, Mike. Talk soon.